I'm pleased to introduce attorney Marcy Einhorn, who is also an experienced mediator. Welcome, Marcy. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Jeff. And today's program is dealing with difficult people and navigating family conversations about elder care. Okay. So thank you, Jeff, for inviting me to speak about dealing with difficult people and family relationships. I come to this from a mediator's perspective. There's a lot I've learned about facilitating difficult conversations about care and planning for an elder. And so today I'm going to share some of those tips with everyone who's here today to kind of let you in on some secrets that mediators learn about facilitating difficult conversations. And I thought nothing more difficult than family relationships where there's been a cutoff or an estrangement and people aren't even talking to each other. So I'm going to talk about estrangements between parent and child today and between siblings, and then how that might affect care and planning for an elder. See if we can advance the slides. So just a quick little graphic to, a classic. This is what ChatGPT came up with when I asked to come up with an image of a parent and adult child. And there's the clock ticking in the background, as it is for all of us. So it can be an estrangement between adult parent and child, or between adult siblings that we'll be looking at today. And then we'll talk about today how these estrangements can interfere with decisions about care and planning for an elder in the family. And then we'll talk about ways to begin to heal the rifts through communication within the family. So for adult children, a goal in dealing with difficult conversations might be that they want to be available to assist an elder's decision-making to the extent the elder wants the support. And the elder herself might really want to rely on adult children when difficult decisions need to be made. And this goes beyond the profile of people who are very independent and don't want any input. This is really geared towards people who welcome input from people they respect. So it's been said that family work can only proceed as quickly as the least healthy member, which, is kind of a benchmark for families having difficult conversations. And hopefully, if there's outside support people are seeking or getting, everybody continues to get that outside support while the family conversations and the family relationships are being restored. I just want to make sure there's some construction going on. Just signal to me if that is interfering with the recording. Okay.
No, we're not picking it up.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll keep going. So we'll first look at cutoffs between a parent and an adult child. And the cutoffs can have just occurred recently or maybe ongoing for a very long time. And in either case, the reasons for a cutoff in a particular family, I like to say, maybe as different as the faces of the moon. And so I went back to ChatGPT and said, tell me, what are some reasons an adult child might cut off a parent? And this is the short list. It could be any multiple of these, any single or multiple, but all of them are quite painful situations for both the parent and the child, possibly leading to an estrangement. So what all parent-child cutoffs have in common, though, is that an estrangement does not solve the problem and may actually be the source of as much pain, if not more, than was the original reason for the cutoff in the first place. So in a book that I've come across called Rules of Estrangement, the author, Joshua Coleman, posits that conflict resolution requires the luxury of time. And people to a conflict need time to heal, to repair, to clarify, to reconsider their positions. And he suggests that if you want a different relationship, it's going to require change on your part. And that's going to be your responsibility to move the relationship past the estrangement. So between a parent and a child, even when you as the parent might think the adult child's ideas are unacceptable to you, you have to find a starting point, an entry point for the conversation. And that might just be an attitude of, let's look at this together. Let's see what we're disagreeing about. Let's name it, and see if we can eventually find some common ground. And this is to help understand how the family members came to this point of cutoff and why they've chosen not to be connected, by keeping an open mind and being willing to hear what the adult child might have to say to a parent, no matter how much you disagree or how painful their message is. Now, between adult siblings, a cutoff may have been initiated for very different reasons than what triggers an estrangement between a parent and adult child. And any resolution between adult siblings may require a different approach. So siblings theoretically are on the same plane in terms of their position within the family. And whereas the parent may yearn for a rapprochement, a reconnection with the adult child, between siblings, there may not be that incentive to reconnect, because they may have launched their own independent lives and not miss the connection that a parent might miss with a child. So between siblings, there are issues of power and control that don't necessarily arise in the parent-child relationship. Siblings may both have equal power within the family, or the sibling with responsibility for caregiving and participation with an adult, with a parent, may have a sense of power or status in the family that they don't want to yield by engaging in any reconnection with another sibling. In addition, siblings may feel that they're going to face a reduction in their role in the family. Their story is going to be retold in a way that they don't agree with if they reconnect with a sibling that they don't get along with. So tools for resolving sibling conflicts take a different direction than the direction I previously mentioned between a parent and a child. Between siblings who might be equal in status in the family, you might want to start by acknowledging something that you can respect about the other sibling. Now, if it's a cutoff or something that the siblings find really traumatic, this is going to take a shift in attitude and perception as well. And a conversation I recently had with a sibling that I hadn't had contact with for quite a while, I was able to thank him for taking a caregiving role in connection with my parent. And that for me was a step forward. That was a shift in attitude, and a real recognition of his contribution to the family life. And that's a start for moving forward. For us, that was a start in moving forward in restoring our connection with each other. So again, it comes down to allowing time and emotional space for people to calmly and objectively evaluate each other's different perspectives, and then maybe be able to come back together at a later point, ready to engage in a new way. So this is hard work. Before we get into, how cutoffs can affect elders, I just want to acknowledge that there's no simple formula for reconnecting with family members who you might be estranged from, where there might be cutoffs. It's a topic that doesn't get discussed a lot in the literature, but it is starting to be addressed. And the book I mentioned, which we can circle back and I can put it in the chat later, if anybody wants to read more about cutoffs and estrangement, but it is starting to show up in the literature more and more. If that's an experience that you're having within your family and would like more information. So as we age, of course, there are new decisions to make about all sorts of issues that we never had to deal with before. What kind of healthcare choices are we making? Are we going to need support, caregiving support, money management support? Is there money to be divided up, or property? And these are all pretty big decisions. Some elders prefer to make these decisions on their own, but if you want family involvement and you're estranged, it's going to be an incentive for bringing people back into your life who you might not currently have contact with. So other decisions might involve getting around safely. Should you be driving? If you don't drive, how are you going to get to your appointments? How are you going to maintain your social connections? And what will happen if you decide to give up your car? Other decisions, if you have property and real estate, are you considering downsizing? And what would that look like? Where should you downsize to? If your children live around the country and are not local, is there a new venue that you want to consider moving to? And would your children welcome you if you decide now to move closer to where they live? So common barriers to restoring difficult relationships involve rebuilding trust, learning a new way to communicate with each other if communication has broken off, a history of difficult communications and broken relationships, and of course, the emotional impact of any traumatic experiences that the family has experienced. So as mediators, we learn that when people may come to the table willing to start talking to each other, and there may come a point with, no matter, I'm just going to back that up a little bit, no matter how willing they are to speak to each other, there comes a point where they reach an impasse. And for mediators, impasse has a very specific meaning. It's the situation where parties hold tight to their version of the facts and the solutions for the problem. So we call that taking positions and drawing conclusions based on our version of the facts. And as mediators, we try to get people to look past their hardened positions and the conclusions they've drawn to consider what their interests are in the problem or the relationship. And that involves looking at the concerns that lie below the conclusions they've drawn. So for example, in the situation where we're talking about an adult elder's ability to continue driving, siblings might have very different positions on that challenging problem. And an older sibling just, randomly choosing one over the other to get a sense of different positions children take might say she's too old and it's time to take away the car keys. And another sibling might say, I want her to have her independence at all costs, and I don't want to be the one to have to drive her around. And yet another sibling might say, I'll give her my car. Maybe it's her car that's the problem. They're drawing conclusions about the problem without really investigating the underlying interests that they might all have in common, which might be the parents' autonomy, their independence, their ability to maintain their social connections, and their safety and the safety of pedestrians and other drivers. So another example of common interests might lie where there's concern about money, the elder's money or the parent's money disappearing, being spent on things that don't make sense, not bills going unpaid. And common interests and concerns might be, you don't want your parent to be taken advantage of. You don't want them to become financially dependent on somebody else managing their money. And you want to make decisions that everyone's going to agree with. So, and these are some tools that mediators have become familiar with that can help a family move through difficult decisions. And one is to identify interests, as I just showed you a few examples, find some common ground, and then start delegating responsibility to different siblings to gather information about the problem from different experts, different resources. Maybe there are medical professionals or financial professionals who could add information and wisdom and knowledge to what's going on with the elder, and then come back together to develop a plan through collaboration. So again, once common interests have been identified, the next steps to working together would be to develop a plan together. And developing a plan involves information gathering and collaboration. And information gathering itself is a step on the path to collaboration. And collaboration is a building block for resolving disagreements. Now, this is all sounds very formulaic, but this is hard work for families involved in estrangements, cutoffs, difficult relationships, even if they're still in communication with each other. All of this is new behavior and new tools for people who may never have used these tools before. So this is not easy work, and I don't want to oversimplify. I just want to give an overview of the types of new behaviors that people can use to move toward solutions that everyone is on board with. And of course, when dealing with older adults, with parents, with elders we're concerned about, we have to always consider what is their capacity to make decisions, to participate in decision-making with other people, or with advisors, with family members. In the law, as a lawyer, capacity is a very black and white concept. You either have the capacity to participate in decision-making or you don't. And if you don't, the legal system has ways to supervise your decision-making that involves giving up a certain amount of autonomy. But we're not talking about legal procedures here. We're talking about families working together, possibly with the help of a neutral mediator to facilitate conversations. And then the elder's capacity can evolve, can rotate, can come and go, and all depends on their tolerance for participating in complex conversations and making important decisions. And even if they're not able to actively participate in a conversation, they might want to be present to hear and observe and offer whatever support they can if their children are starting to make decisions for them. So a little review here. We looked at estrangements between a parent and an adult child and between adult siblings. And we examined briefly how cutoffs within the family can affect care and planning for an elder. And we talked a little bit about goals. If adult children want to be involved in caring for an elder, and if the elder wants the support of his or her adult children, estrangements and cutoffs can cheat everybody out of the relationship and the input that they really want to have. We just explored new and different ways to communicate by identifying interests and moving off of hardened positions and black and white conclusions. We talked about searching for common ground and using tools like gathering information, collaborating, and developing a plan as tools for a new way to communicate with each other about important decisions. And especially for siblings, we talked about trying to acknowledge each other's positive contributions to the family, and taking time and space to reconsider your attitudes, your positions, the rift that you've experienced, and considering trying a new attitude towards your relationships with each other. So in conclusion, the most important tools, attitudes are to begin to have some empathy for people in the family who you might find difficult to deal with, a willingness to listen to each other without judgment, and knowing that you're going to have an opportunity to be heard and to express your concerns also without judgment, and then working on your own capacity to change your approach to what the problem has been, what the situation has been. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up here and encourage anyone to reach out if you'd like more information, and turn it back over to Jeff to facilitate any questions or comments that people might want to ask at this point.
Okay, I'm just going to leave that up for a second in case you want to take down her information. Okay. And now, how do I, am I still sharing? Or
Well,
are we good?
we're waiting, there we go. We're waiting for you to come back in and just find out if there are any questions or comments, suggestions.
Yep. Feel free to type questions in the chat. We have one great point about the different perspectives rooted in each family member, then identifying those interests as it would most definitely impact the stance we take on an issue. Realizing these hidden reasons will lead to a better common approach. I like that.
Yeah, I like to say that the elder is always in the room, maybe figuratively, maybe literally, but whether or not they're present at difficult conversations about caring for an elder, it's their interests that are at stake. It's their interests that are most important. And that can be a motivator for changing the way adult siblings talk to each other, and parking any long-term disputes that have been going on to focus on what needs to be done to positively, constructively move into the future.
What does information gathering look like? Uh, I can come up with one situation where the hospital was working on an elder who had nothing wrong with his legs or walking, but for some reason they assigned help for this individual to walk. And when he got home, the family argued about taking him for a walk outside, whether he would need a walker or not. So what would the fact finding look like in a situation like that? Because you have the hospital just saying, "Oh, he can't walk," when it had nothing to do with walking, you know?
I mean, I would want to know what the hospital was worried about. Was it their own liability? Were they concerned? Did he check off some benchmarks that for them signals somebody has a mobility issue? What was the hospital concerned about? I would back up to
Hmm.
gathering information directly from the hospital or whoever his doctors were. Like, what was it that triggered their concern about his mobility? And was that a concern specific to being in an institution that is irrelevant once you're in your home turf? So that would be a starting point, I would think, for information gathering. If they named a condition, then I'd want to learn more about that condition. What was the condition? Maybe it was low blood pressure and his meds needed to be adjusted, or maybe it was an allergic reaction to meds or the lack of exercise. If, you're hospitalized and you're limited to getting around, maybe it weakens, depending on how long the person was in the hospital, maybe they were concerned about his muscle strength weakening, So there were a lot of questions I would have asked at the hospital level they're the ones who made that decision. And based on their answers, then you might have more information that you want to inquire about, or it might be enough information to say, we don't need that, we don't have that concerns here at home. And so that's where I would start. But a hypothetical problem that I talk about all the time is the driving issue. Should we take away mom's car keys? And information gathering around that could look like, do the parents' glasses need to be checked? Do the meds need to be checked? Do the brakes need to be checked? When's the last time a mechanic looked at the car? Does the elder need to retake or take a driver ed course offered like by AARP? Or, when's the last time their driving skills were evaluated or reevaluated? Lots of information gathering you could do before you take away the car keys. And then if that's going to be the ultimate resolution and autonomy and independence is a concern, could his or her friends come to the home? Could somebody else be driving? Is Access-a-Ride available? So lots of information gathering just between, you can't drive anymore, give me the keys, and
Hmm.
threatening staying on the road when you might be a danger to others. Lots of choices in between.
And then you have the more obvious situations where the driver either puts lead on the gas pedal or lead on the brake. So you're either lurching forward or you're, you know, being
Right.
forced forward,
And
and you
so,
have to convince that person to not drive. You have to convince that elder.
yeah, and again, is there something going on with them cognitively? So maybe that
Hmm.
needs to be evaluated by a professional rather than you being the one who has to come in, like the marshal and say, we're taking your keys away. But if you do it based on some more information where there's a rational basis for the choice and you can offer alternatives to just taking the car away, it may soften the blow because, we're a car culture and we give up those cars very unwillingly. Even past, I always retell the story of my son's grandfather-in-law. It was not his grandfather. The grandfather-in-law was legally blind and still driving. And when the in-laws went to him and said, Grandpa, you just can't do this anymore. You might hurt a child, you could kill a child. And his response was, why aren't those children in school? So he was not hearing, any logic to it until uh, they, forced the issue. Um, yeah. So people are not always willing until there's more information, until there's a wealth of information that they're confronted with on important decisions, quality of life decisions like that. And in terms of estrangement, and cutoffs, like the list I showed that was generated by ChatGPT, there can be innumerable reasons for cutoff and all seemingly very justifiable. But there comes a point for those of us, we're living longer and longer lives. And I'm certainly at the point where I want a clean slate when I go. And I want to make sure that even the difficult relationships in my family have been cleaned up. And I'm willing to do the work on my side to clean those relationships up, whether or not people on the other side are willing. And I think what happens as we live these longer and longer lives, people can go one of two ways. They either soften and are open to a new way of communicating, or they harden, and what's been done has been done, and they're not going to change, and let's just leave it the way it is. But it's up to us to decide what effort we're willing to put in to clear the slate from these difficult relationships, even if it means starting from square one, and never getting an acknowledgement of the triggering issue that caused the break in the first place. I have adult children. I have a 90-plus-year-old mother, and all of those relationships take continual reevaluation and reconsideration of what was and the history that went into the family relationships, and in different situations, cutoffs and estrangements. And then how much work am I willing to do to restore them for my benefit as an elder? What do I want the relationships in my life as an elder to look like? So not easy work. It's not for the faint of heart, and I encourage people I applaud everyone who's here just to even consider the issue of difficult family relationships, especially in the context of giving care and receiving care as we age.
We have one comment in the chat. It was very hard to determine at which point my mom was not able to make decisions for herself. Fortunately, we gave and continue to give her the freedom to make decisions, some limited decisions that do not affect her safety. I will put into practice making sure she is one-seated at the decision table, even though she is not able to make executive decisions.
Well, thank you for that. I applaud your effort and that may be what it is. It's not, again, it's not black and white process. It's a continuum of decision making and changing technique and tools as we age that are appropriate. For you, it was helping to preserve your mom's sense of independence and self-respect, while at the same time making sure that she wasn't going to harm herself or others. There are professionals out there who support families who are dealing with this continuum of changes. There are daily money managers who will come in and write checks and balance the checkbook, pay the bills, go through the mail, with the elder's involvement to the extent the elder is involved. So the bills get paid, the electricity doesn't get cut off, the phone doesn't get cut off. There are geriatric care managers who will get involved in supervising daily activities. Maybe you have aides involved in caring for an elder at this point, but somebody needs to supervise the aides, and there are geriatric care managers who can do that. And especially if someone falls into serious ill health and requires a lot of support and a lot of care, which may go beyond the resources that just the adult children have to offer.
Do you have a list of money managers in New York City?
Well, if that's addressed to Jeff, I don't know, maybe PSS does. I have one that I can recommend. Just shoot me an email if you If you need my contact information, I can put it back in the chat. And I will
Mhm.
share the name of a money manager that I've recently interviewed and come in contact with. And it's a firm that's been around a really long time. So let's see if I can just get my contact info.
Yes, please.
And then again, as a mediator, it's hard for families to all come to the table. What's been happening is I'll be contacted by a sibling who is unhappy with the way the family is miscommunicating with each other and wants to see a better a better way of dealing with each other without any particular urgency or trauma or problem with the elder, but they, as siblings, she wanted to see, it's happened more than once, that just the siblings start talking to each other more constructively. So in the event of a need to make an important decision, they've rebuilt their relationship. And what can happen in a virtual mediation where all the siblings finally agree to all come on screen. And that is the first challenge, to get everyone to agree to step up and come to the table to talk. But once we're past that first, and once we're past that first hurdle, and the way I facilitate that is I will call each and every sibling within a family that's interested in mediating to hear from them one-on-one independently before we all come to the table. So they know that I've heard their story in confidence without revealing it to the others in the Zoom or in the room. And then it's a matter of setting an agenda for the conversation. What are we going to talk about here? And so we don't get off on tangents about, you took mom's earrings last Christmas or 10 years ago, and I'm still waiting for you to bring them back. We're not going to, if the issue is hiring aides or hiring a geriatric care manager, we're not going to be talking about, who got college paid for, or, who wound up with the crystal, you may learn how to communicate with each other about those historical issues at a future time going forward. But mediated conversations tend to start off very focused on a particular immediate problem or challenge between the siblings and or the adult parent, the elder parent, to help limit the opportunity for dispute and promote the potential for collaboration.
I think different families handle situations differently. Uh, I remember I was observing a family and we were having dinner, and when one of the elders was experiencing cognitive decline, and someone asked her, "Would you like a glass of wine with dinner?" And I interjected immediately, "No, she is not having wine with dinner." And they said, "No, no, no, it's up to her. We're allowing her to make the decision." And so, yes, she did have the glass of wine.
And the result, what was the result of that glass of wine? Was it what you were concerned about?
Oh, yeah. I was concerned that it could lead to further deterioration, but it's up to the person, and perhaps it did, but it wasn't the ultimate downfall, you know.
And it sounds like the family members might have considered this as a challenge and come
Hmm.
up with this as an agreed resolution for now.
Right.
Who
Hmm.
knows?
Hmm.
Next family dinner, there might not be any wine on the table. We
Yep.
don't know. Because it's
Yeah.
very fluid, right? It can be, especially with
Mhm.
cognitive
And
issues.
it was their family. It wasn't my say, even though I was concerned, it's,
Yeah.
you know, so sometimes we have to step back and, allow families to be families
Right.
with making their own decisions.
Yeah. A
Absolutely.
common challenge that comes up might be for families that have resources selling off a second home that the family has a history of sharing. You know, it might be a beach house or just a vacation home owned by the elders, but adult siblings and maybe even grandchildren have known that they could make use of that vacation home, that second home, over a span of years. You know, it's now a third generation resource, and there may come a point where some family members think it's time to sell the house, and other family members are so attached to it emotionally that they just cannot let go. Of course, this is for families with resources. Not everybody has this prosperity problem, but it's indicative of the types of disagreements families can have. You know, for some family, it can be over real estate. For other families, it can be, there's a book called uh, Who Gets Mom's Yellow Pie Plate? It could be as simple a resource as, you know, some ceramic knickknack that has a lot of meaning for the family. And then it comes down to, how do people talk to each other about the problem before you start trying to carve a solution in stone. And so in the situation where it involves a family home, sometimes family members will agree to buy out a family and keep the house within the family itself. Or, you know, if people are motivated to come up with cash to pay off college loans or to fund somebody's tuition, they may all agree to go in and sell the house so that it can be used for the next generation's more immediate needs. It's just a matter of changing the way you talk to each other and a willingness to change. And then that can involve information gathering as well. Who can support the family in changing their methods and their means of dealing with each other? It could be a social worker, a family counselor, or, you know, a mediator. Not everything has to wind up in court. You know, not every dispute is appropriate for court. And I encourage people to find simpler ways of resolving their disputes for the benefit of everyone, if possible.
How do people come across or hear of mediators?
There are lots of different ways. If a case winds up in court, a lot of the judges now are finally familiar with mediation as a resource. But a lot of these disputes never rise to the level of litigation. And then there are bar associations that have mediation resources, and there are websites for mediate.com that lists various mediators around the country. Or you just attend a webinar like this and you take contact information and, you know, reach out to me for more information. I'm happy to share with you the work that I do.
Excellent. So sometimes it's through a court, but sometimes you, for example, meet a mediator
Right,
at an
right.
event like this. Yeah.
Yeah. Or can be referred by people who've already used a mediator, just like any other
Mhm.
professional, a personal recommendation. Um, yeah.
Is it typically through the bar, or is there an association of mediators
There's
where
an
people can?
association of family mediators. It's not specific to elders. There's
Mhm.
an organization called the Association for Conflict Resolution that has an elder mediator committee. So if you reached out to ACR of Greater New York, Association for Conflict Resolution of Greater New York, and looked for the information about elder mediators, that's another way but there is also a National Association of Family Mediators. I think it's Association of Professional Family Mediators, APFM. And again, they're not all elder mediators, but it's a place to begin your research, to see if you can find somebody that you can work with.
Yeah, so we have looked at property, a little bit about money, um, about kind of internal types of disputes and how they can be mediated or at least resolved or improving communication. Uh, what are some of the other issues? I remember there was caregiving. What kind of care is required? What expenses are necessary?
Sure.
Um, yeah. Um,
So a friend of mine, in my circle, there's this term solo agers, and it's people who don't have family to rely on. So their friends become their family of choice. And an elder in our circle recently fell ill and was declining. And her peers, also in their 80s, were responsible for helping to help her make decisions about care and planning until she finally wound up in the hospital. Her health deteriorated to the point where she wound up in the hospital, and they had been urging her to interview and hire a geriatric care manager who could facilitate hiring aides, making sure that whatever devices she needed to support her mobility and her recovery were taken care of, were ordered and paid for. And she just resisted till the very end, until her friends, her solo aging friends, finally said, "We can't do this anymore. You need to interview a geriatric care manager. We have one lined up for you to interview. We'll come to the interview with you," which was important because she was not she was hostile towards the geriatric care manager. But ultimately, when the friend said, "We're not going to do this anymore, you need a professional," she agreed, and she hired the geriatric care manager to oversee, administer, take care of all the, administrative details of her care, not preempting her doctors, certainly keeping a role for her friends that they could manage without making them her caregivers for things that they were not qualified or able to manage anymore. So it's one way of doing it.
yeah, so such options are not necessarily needed to be made by family members deciding what kind of, care or how frequently, uh, an aide should be visiting the house. Uh, it can be, it can be through a professional
Right.
who is better able to assess the situation.
Right. And of course, you're going to rely on your doctor's opinions, what your insurance coverage allows and permits and will actually cover. It's not, sometimes it's not even up to us to decide what kind of support we're going to get. We have to apply for the benefits that we're entitled to, find out what benefits we are entitled to. A neighbor has been taking care of her mom since COVID, who was 99 when COVID hit, is now 104, and originally qualified for very little at-home care, maybe a couple of hours a day, 5 days a week. And it wasn't until she finally fell, maybe when she just turned 104, that she finally qualified for 7-day-a-week care. So my neighbor was the primary caregiver during all that time, with the help of aides from 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, whatever it was, 5 days a week. And when she finally had an injury that qualified her for 7-day-a-week care, that's when they were able to bring in care 7 days a week. So it's not always up to us no matter how much we care for the person, as in love the person, want to see them well, but the coverage may not provide for it. So, and these are things that if you're a solo ager, you don't have anybody else lined up to make these decisions for you. If you have the resources, you can hire a geriatric care manager to help you facilitate and get the resources that you're entitled to.
Yeah, and that kind of segues, maybe taking off the mediator hat for a moment and the attorney hat comes on, is the necessary documents that older adults need, such as, power of attorney, the will, healthcare proxy. There was another
Living
type
will.
of, yeah, living will, and there was another health health document. I can't remember what the name of it was. There are
Well, there's
just
a
different.
end of life, there's a MOLST for treatment, terminating treatment. And
Hmm.
DNRs do not resuscitate orders. Attorneys are gonna tell you to get, everybody needs a power of attorney, everybody needs a healthcare proxy. In New York, living wills are not formally acknowledged, they're just suggestive of what you would like to happen at the end of
Hmm.
life. The decisions that you want, they're not enforceable in a court of law, but the power of attorney and the healthcare proxies are enforceable. And the healthcare proxy only kicks in if you're not able to make decisions for yourself. You're not giving away any authority or power to make your own healthcare decisions. And they only kick in if you're not able to make decisions for yourself. And the power of attorney is really important to avoid. With a power of attorney, it increases the ability to avoid anything like a guardianship. I've just heard of a situation where even though someone had a power of attorney, a judge appointed a temporary guardian while the family worked through the challenges they were going through. But typically, with a power of attorney in place, fully authorized and properly signed, a judge will never appoint a guardian. And people want to avoid guardianships because it's the ultimate delegation of your autonomy to somebody
Hmm.
who's been appointed by the court to take care of you. Now, if you can't take care of yourself, you'll be grateful if you get a great guardian, and there are good guardians out there who will make the decisions that you would like to be made for you. But at a minimum, everyone should have a power of attorney executed in a healthcare proxy, and people who might be impacted or contacted to make decisions for you should know where those documents are.
So if anyone has questions, you can email us, or you can email Marcy, email directly to Marcy, whose information is in the chat, marcyesk@gmail.com.
And I do offer free 15-minute consultations through, if you email me, I will send you a link. And I have not a lot of free time, but I do have appointments that I'm willing to book for people if you would like more information in a free 15-minute session. And you're willing to be flexible about when and when that happens, and we do it on Zoom. And if you email me for information, I'll send you the link to book a free 15-minute consultation.
We have one quick last question. Has
Okay.
anyone interacted with healthcare advocates while dealing with elderly ones?
I have not dealt with healthcare advocates. I'm not sure if they're hospital employees or independents. I'd like to know more about that.
Yeah, or maybe they're social workers as well.
Mhm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.